as in accordance with the commemoration of the adoption of the Constitution of India, which was happened on 26 November 1949, even though it has come into force on 26 January 1950. So it started. India started celebrating this Constitution Day as a tribute to late B.R. Ambedkar. And every year, as per the UGC and the ministry direction, we are celebrating this. So today, with us, we have a special guest and the speaker, Mr. Sriraj Kudi, Assistant Professor working at Manipal Institute of Communication. On behalf of Dean MCHP and Student Affairs Committee, I extend a cordial welcome to Mr. Sriraj Kudi. And we also put on place our appreciation for accepting our invitation and agreeing for delivering an address during this occasion. I would also like to welcome Ms. Indu Toby, chairperson of our Student Affairs Committee, and her entire faculty team, as well as the Student Affairs Committee. I also welcome all the head of the departments and chairpersons of Empower Committee to this event. My sincere welcome to faculty and of course all the students who are participating in this virtual meeting. So with these few words, I once again welcome all of you to this Constitution Day celebration. Thank you, Ananta.
Thank you, sir, for extending a warm welcome. Today, we have with us Mr. Sriraj Kudi, Assistant Professor, Senior Scale, Manipal Institute of Communication. I now request Mr. Sai Nath, Assistant Professor, Department of Perfusion Technology, to introduce the guest speaker.
Good afternoon, all. With immense pleasure, I introduce Mr. Sriraj Kudi, the speaker of the day. Mr. Sriraj Kudi is working as Assistant Professor, Senior Scale at MIC Manipal. He teaches Constitution, Political Communication, and TV-related courses. He is also the coordinator of certificate program in Gandhian and Peace Studies. He was in the panel of experts for Doordarshan's coverage of 2019 general elections. Recently, he has been nominated by the Governor of Karnataka as the member of Karnataka Film Academy, Bangalore, for the duration of 3 years. Before joining MIC, Mr. Sriraj was working as a journalist with ANI and ETV in New Delhi. A warm welcome to this session. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, MCHP, for this invitation. I personally feel that till the last year, I used to take the Constitution, Indian Constitution subject for MCHP. In that sense, it's an extension of my working area. So in that sense, it's revisiting my own institution and not and definitely not as a guest. And maybe I'm taking one of my additional classes there for the MCHP. That's what I feel when I when Sir Sai Nath asked me to come for this talk. This is really a pleasure to be associated with MCHP and also to share my knowledge related to Constitution and definitely my understanding of Constitution. It's very on this very important day, that is November 26th. We all know that on November 26, 1949, the Constitutional Assembly completed its deliberations and subsequently adopted the Constitution, and which came into force 2 months later, that is January 26, 1950. But in the journey of any state, a constitution makes a very important milestone, or maybe considered as an important milestone in the journey of a state. If you look at the history part, whether we had the constitutions earlier, definitely yes, but in different forms, not in the modern style of constitutions what we have here in India. But why Indian Constitution makes so important or so different? Look at the states which started the journey along with us. Look at this a sister state which has emerged on the night of 14th of August 1947, the state of Pakistan. Look at the state of the Myanmar, Sri Lanka, Nepal, subordinate states. They all have either rejected or failed in their journey, in their constitutional journey. India has continued its march, though we have witnessed many roadblocks, many humps in this journey. It was definitely not a smoothful journey, but yes, we still are managing, and we will continue to manage with the same constitutions, or the framework of the constitution has not been changed. That's what makes this constitutional journey for India an important aspect. Constitution tend to be written at momentous turning points in a country's history. Generally, when a war is lost, or when an empire is vanished, or an old order has been overthrown by revolt or any other movements, revolutions, or when a dictator dies, or when an authoritarian government forced to step aside. So these are a few instances which have witnessed generally that led to the formation of a new constitution. These sorts of things that are forced for the creation of a constituent assembly. The constituent assembly is generally the house that would be created with all the wise men or the members as a representatives, and subsequently they would churn their ideas and produce a document which we would call further as constitutions. Constitutional are rarely written in the moments of tranquility or the peaceful nature. Generally, the constitutions are considered as a product of a political crisis. The new constitution, generally the people who have involved earlier, maybe to overthrow the previous government or in the form of the revolution or the demands, etc. They would look at the constitution as a draft for their future, as a document for the future. So they have a lot of expectations from the constitutions. And there are a certain number of population. There will be a certain number of population which would be like they don't know that what they would get out of this constitution, and they have their own fear. They have their own like they would look at the constitutions in the manner in which whether they would actually benefit them or not. So in any document that comes out of these ideas or exchange of ideas, so it has both expectations as well as a sort of fear. So as all these things have happened with the Indian constitutions as well. Earlier, maybe India has witnessed the concepts of some of the smritis, some maybe in the concepts of the Buddhist concepts, also their idea of constitution, or the state idea of a statecraft being discussed. Or may in the 12th century era in the southern state of Karnataka, where we witnessed by revolution by Basaveshwara, who had created then a sort of a parliamentary concept of a system wherein they can bring in exercise rather than a kingship. Taking all these lessons from all these experiences, the Constitution of India was framed. To invoke an European author, I would like to quote, "The idea of a constitution was greeted enthusiastically at the hour of its birth as the fulfillment of all hopes, for political progress. Constitutions, when they succeed, they exert the beneficial pressure on society to rationalize and improve itself. So the constitutional framers, they can place the ideas based on their previous experiences and definitely with a view, with a vision for the future. So the Constitution is not a rigid document, and Constitution can't be a rigid document. Constitution has to be ever evolving document. Then only it can fit into the aspiration and expectations of the people and the new coming generations. The constitutional drafters, they definitely bring in their experiences not only from the Indian or experiences, but their experiences with the different states. And India has borrowed many such experiences from different states. But one of the major hindrance to these constitutional framers was that they do not know that in fact how the future would be. If they are well prepared to for maybe for a near future, but definitely not a long one. So in that sense, the theory of the Constitution had to be discussed on a broad overview, wherein the creation of a Constitution cannot be from just inspirations of the past, or definitely not with some imagined futures. They may present a broad model, and the Constitution drafters ultimately would understand that when they stand in the crucial time of the history, they cannot move more onto the futures. So experiencing or experimenting with the Constitution would always lie with the generations that come in future. As far as the making of the Indian Constitution is concerned, the state with a magnificent diversity of language, of culture, of tradition, of political views, social strata, customs, traditions, belongingness, identity. In that sense, the drafting of the Indian Constitution was an Herculean task to what we witness today as a document for the future had definitely passed through a very momentous, very turmoil-filled discussions and areas. If you consider, as I said, the situation of 1947 to 1950, you would understand why the constitutional becomes an important aspect for India. I would like to invoke the Act of Indian Independence, the Indian Independence Act of 1947. The Act of 1947, which provided us the independence. In its entire area, apart from the definition, not apart from the title, has no mention about the concept of independence to the state of India, but was very categorically identifies the formation or defines the formation of the state of Pakistan. It clearly says that Baluchistan, Sindh, West Punjab, East Bangla, and Sylhet district of Assam, they would all together make one state called Pakistan. It's very clear. The geographical boundaries are defined very clearly. But when it comes to India, the very same act gave a free hand to 560 odd princely states. What did this 1947 Act say? They said, look, either you can be with India, or you can associate with Pakistan, or you can form your new union that's called as a Princelistan, or you can be independent. So all options are open with them. So the Act of 1947 actually created 560 plus 2 additional states on this land, new states on this land, nation states on this land, in that sense. Bringing them under one map, bringing them under one thread, that was a major task that India had witnessed. And obviously, we all know that 3 major states that have been a roadblock to this entire process. The rest have agreed. In fact, the first state to declare itself as an sovereign independent republic was the state of Travancore. Was the first state to declare that they are independent. Thankfully, the mediation of Maharaja of Mysore and subsequently the southern Indian states all agreed with Maharajas, and then subsequently they started signing the documents with the state of India. But 3 states, Junagadh, the state of Jammu and Kashmir, the erstwhile state of Jammu and Kashmir, that means the current union territories of Jammu and Kashmir and the Ladakh, and Hyderabad. So these are the 3 areas became major issues for us. But subsequently we solved 2 out of 3, and 1 remained, and 1 still is haunting us, the state of India. Where to go, or whether the interest of the state of people of Jammu and Kashmir, or the people's large interest, the state interest of the state of India, or the state interest of Pakistan, we still don't know. A few years back, when an Indian opposition leader visited Karachi, he made a statement there saying that Pakistan should revisit what was in the minds of the father of their state, the state of Pakistan. As India promised, or the Indian leaders like Mahatma Gandhi, Nehru, Patel, Ambedkar, Maulana Azad, or any other leader promised here of a state for all, and similar statements were given by, at a later stage, by the Jinnah too. But they dumped all ideas. They dumped all ideas. And the result was what? The result was the influx of large-scale refugees into the Indian land. Had to handle the state formation, had to handle the refugee problem, the internal political crisis, and amongst this was the journey of a constitution. This was the state of India when it started the drafting of the constitution. In this journey, in 1946, Pandit Nehru made an inspirational speech in the Constitutional Assembly. and which later was considered or adopted as an objective resolution of the Constituent Assembly. That's the speech or the objective resolution, what the 8-point resolution that the Constitutional Assembly adopted, that actually earmarked the beginning process of the drafting action. That provided us the idea of how India should look forward and how the constitutional or the contours of the constitutions can be. That objective resolution fixed the guidelines, fixed the stream for the journey of the constitution. That's an important milestone, I believe, in our historic journey of constitution. Well, as we all know, in 1949, this is it's more than a 2 hours journey, 2 years journey, wherein India finally adopted the constitution on November 1949. As I mentioned, that some of the states that have started their journey along with India, I would like to mention that the Constitutional Assembly of Pakistan took very long time to adopt their own constitution. And it adopted even after the death of Jinnah in 1956, but only to disband in 1958. Only 2 years. The constitution survived for only 2 years. Similarly, in the state of Burma, Myanmar, when the military took over, the constitution was abandoned. Nepal is still struggling to get their own. We have witnessed many other states in the European and other countries, wherein still they have adopted some of the religious laws as the laws of the state. India has not adopted any of the religious laws as laws of the states. In that sense, we are a much modern. And what probably in the dream of the constitutional fathers, it is really really a cornerstone of our constitution, of our nation, of the journey of the nation. And who are these people actually framed or drafted this constitution? That's another important factor. There were well literated people in that sense. There were foreign returns. Almost all Indian leaders were then studied in Europe, and they all studied law. Majority of the people studied law. The people who studied in India, they were also well-read people. But there were also members of the tribals. Many of the the tribals at that juncture raised like their objections for straight away putting ban on some of the practices, and subsequently the Constitutional Assembly had to drop the ideas, though they were considered as an act of reforms, unless you bring in all the people along. But there were many people who guided, or whom we can call today as the people who guided the process of the constitutions, or maybe the people who are actively participated in this entire idea of constitution, where like Alladi Krishnaswamy Iyer, Dr. K.M. Munshi, Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, Pandit Thakur Das Bhargava, who actually brought this idea of reasonableness. And there were also many people, many women participants in this, like Rajkumari Amrit Kaur, Hans Mehta, and others, other people who were attending, who were actively participated in his deliberations. So when we say that idea of inclusiveness, so that was actually visible in the very formation of the Indian Constitutional Assembly itself. And who came to the Constitutional Assembly? Both center, from the right, left, and also from the people who themselves can be called as the socialists or the revolutionaries or the right-wing people, or the members of the minority communities, or the members from the British families, representative of the princely states. They all were part of this entire formation of the Constitution. Well, it is true that the foundation of the Constitution was taken largely from the Government of India Act of 1935. But definitely it was not a Control C and Control V. I mean to say, it was not an act of plagiarism in that sense. But it is an inspiration that we took from the Act of 1935 and adopted most of its clauses as part of the Indian Constitution. Indian Constitution also drew inspirations from the American experiences, the British experiences, the French, the Russian, and finally they drafted around 395 articles with 8 schedules, and subsequently which was increased to 12 schedules. Given the given the significance, like in the last 70 years, India had witnessed more than 100 amendments. In fact, the first amendment was moved in the 1951 itself, just a year after the the beginning of the constitutional journey. That's why there is also a sort of joke that why generally a bookseller don't keep the constitutional book, because it's a periodical rather than a book. The Constitution combines the idea of the federal structure, I mean to say the strong center, the idea of a strong center, and definitely the idea of the states with functioning autonomy. We have the fundamental rights, fundamental duties, and the directive principles as one of the prime concepts of our constitutions. But we have also faced some of the challenges over these years, that are the matters that are related to language, some of the key fundamental rights, like the idea of reservation or providing opportunities, or the recent turmoil that India had witnessed with respect to the identification of its citizens. Definitely, these are some of the issues that have haunted, and maybe they would haunt for a few more years before we arrive at a conclusion. There is another way to look at this constitution as consisting of the political and democratic text, because it also talks about elections, it talks about the parliamentary control, the civilian control, which is most important. It is very important to note that even the Indian military works under the orders of a civilian leadership. And fortunately, till now, the military never tried to overrule the ideas that were presented from side of the civilian leadership. The justice and the rule of law, which are entrusted to the ideas of judiciary, especially with respect to the high courts and the Supreme Courts. Without the idea of judiciary, probably the discussion of constitution itself is a meaningless act. In the last 70 years of journey, our constitution actually got meaning through many definitions that were provided from the judgments of the Supreme Court and the high courts. Some of we can say that the Keshavananda Bharati, who passed away recently, and many other judgments that have made or defined or redefined the ideas or the principles of the constitutions or various provisions of the constitutions. Without the democratic text, people's power would be swallowed by the judges otherwise. Since independence, the country's constitutional history represents the tension between the democratic and the justice text, with hostility between the parliament and judiciary. We have witnessed at many junctures that there was a clash between the parliament and the judiciary, especially in 75 and 77. I would bring those aspects in a few minutes. The parliament kept using the powers to amend the constitutions, to overrule the judiciary's decisions until 1973, when the Supreme Court declared that Parliament's amending powers are limited, and they should not disturb any of the basic structure of the Constitution. They cannot keep on making changes after changes. No, they cannot do that. There should be some sort of a check and balance system. And these tensions had continued even to date. And the discussion between the parliamentary involvement or the political involvement in the structure of judiciary is one of the major area of discussions. But apart from a sort of turmoilic situations, India maintained a sort of balance between both these institutions or both these constitutional institutions, judiciary and the parliament. I would like to mention, and I would like to give a credit to the first Prime Minister of this country, Pandit Nehru, for sustaining the constitutional spirit with the zeal of democratic and the independence of the state till his death in 1964. Apart from the instance wherein he imposed the president's rule in the state of Kerala by dismissing E.M.S. Namboodiripada's government, Nehru was largely respected as a democratic leader. These are very few instances wherein he overruled the idea and the concept of a parliamentary system. But as far as the judiciary is concerned, he never ever tried to overrule or the influence the idea of judiciary or the independence nature of judiciary. He was the one who pushed to, though there was a large scale opposition, to bring reforms, especially with respect to the religious reforms, with the introduction of the Hindu Code Bill, which became one of the election issue, and which was the issue that that actually caused Dr. Ambedkar to leave the Congress party. But Nehru promised the assembly and also the cabinet and also to Dr. Ambedkar that, look, once we come back after the election, we will definitely bring in these reforms. But if you say that, first go, we have to do the reforms, it's not possible. I need to convince the people. And subsequently, it becomes an election issue in 1951. And Nehru goes with the idea of reforms in the election, and he wins the election. And when he come back with a majority, then definitely, then he brings the reforms, the idea of reforms into that. He was the one who has abolished the zamindari concept. So these are some of the ideas that the Nehruvian era witnessed. Can be considered as the milestone also in the journey of in the entire journey of the constitution. But contrary to the Nehruvian concept, his daughter Indira Gandhi has literally manipulated the many parts of the constitution between the era of 1975 to 1977. She literally spoiled. From page 1 to the last page, she amended at every juncture. With the 42nd and 44th amendment to the constitution, which were known as a mini constitution itself, had brought many changes. She dismissed many governments, majority governments, overruling the ideas of parliamentary concepts, straight away sent the leaders of the opposition to the jail. The freedom of speech and expression, that is one of the fundamental rights, that was taken back. The constitution itself was suspended. The fundamental, because in the idea of the internal emergency, then it's only the police Raj, it is only the government's Raj. And very interestingly, please note that it was the very same constitution which sent her to jail. It was this very constitutional process which brought a legal, elected, democratic government to replace her in a peaceful manner. In a peaceful manner. It was this very same constitution and the judiciary which dragged a sitting prime minister of this country, I mean again Indira Gandhi, before a court to trial her for the charges of corruption. This was very same judiciary also sent her to jail as well for the charges of corruption. So this is if we say that we have not experimented or we have done with this constitution or the rule of law, I say no, we still have options. We still have options within this framework, which we have not experimented at all, which we have not touched it at all. So we, sitting in this generation, need not lose hopes in the constitution. We have to reaffirm, you have to reiterate our loyalty to these constitutions. Definitely constitution would not let you go out. Definitely it will serve the purpose that, like what your expectations or as an individual, as a citizen of this country, to meet the larger good of the state. I would like to quote one of the two important editorials that were written by the Hindu newspaper. One was in November 29, 1947, after the adoption of the new constitution. which says that nobody claims that the constitution is perfect, or even that it is the best that could have been devised if all the talent and patriotism theoretically available in the country could have been harnessed to the task. This, like all previous attempts at constitution making, was largely molded by the circumstances in which it was born. As Dr. Ambedkar pointed in his concluding speech, the Constituent Assembly, being predominantly composed of a compact political party, that is the Congress, has naturally been guided in its main objectives by the preferences of that party. At the same time, it has included a numerically small but useful minority of men who do not belong to the Congress, but who are generally in sympathy with a vision which the Congress has cherished of the future. These are brought to the debate and knowledge of the independence of the judgment, which have proved useful in spite of the conscious and prolonged labor of the men. There have been an elements of patchworks, unresolved contradictions, and imperfectly apprehended trends. It can only be set down to the confusion of ideologies, which is characteristic of our age, and coping with which are probably the people even less well prepared than the nations which have long enjoyed political freedom. He also calls upon the people, that revolutionary people, that, like, yes, you can come back and set the journey of the state. The second, I would like to quote from the 26th January, the editorial that is again written by the Hindu in 1950. For Republican India, it is as necessary as it was for the struggling to be free. To keep the crusading spirit alive, only the crusade must be turned against the enemy within. The Constitution has provided us with a shell of democracy. It is up to us to invoke life into it. Very important part. The pluralistic legends of creations, the speak of Virat lying prone on the face of the waters, unresponsive to any of the lesser powers that entered until the last supreme spirit entered the fourth with the Virat mood. We may regard that as a parable of our present political situation. The Republic of Weimar drew the admirable constitution which became the waste paper because the Republic had no fire in its belly. It is that fire, that emergence, that energy of life that must be roused in the dormant conscience of the people if India is to build up a fair, equitable, and a viable polity and full life for her millions. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for such an informative and thought-provoking talk on the Constitution of India. With that, we have come to the end of the program. Link for feedback has been shared in the chat box. Kindly fill the feedback. I repeat, all the attendees, kindly fill the feedback that has been shared in the chat box. I now request Ms. Indu Toby, Assistant Professor, Department of Clinical Psychology, to propose the vote of thanks.
Good afternoon, everyone. Respected Dean Dr. Arunji Maya, Associate Dean Dr. Sabu K, Speaker of the Day, Mr. Sriraj Gudi, dear faculty members and my dear students. Yet another virtual celebration. As you all know, India is celebrating the Constitution Day today. This is the day Constituent Assembly adopted the Constitution of India. This is also the day you remember Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, the chief architect behind. At the outset, I would like to thank our Dean, Dr. Arunji Maya, and Associate Dean, Dr. Sabu Khem, for all the support in materializing this event. We have just listened to the powerful and enlightening talk by our eminent speaker, Mr. Sri Rajguri. On behalf of Manipal College of Health Professions, I express my sincere gratitude to you, sir. Thank you so much. A word of appreciation. A word of appreciation and thanks to Mr. Srinath, Sainath, and Mr. Binoy for coordinating this event. Thank you. I thank my fellow committee members for all their support. I thank all the heads of departments and faculty colleagues for your presence. Dear students, we appreciate your participation and big thank you to all of you. Have a great afternoon. Thank you. Once again, a reminder, please do fill in the feedback. The link is provided in the chat box.
Thank you, one and all.